They're famous at the recorder's office. Last year they fined a veteran for flying 2 flags instead of 1. She shook her head. I'll pull the easement file Monday. By Monday night, she texted me a scan of the plat overlay. You're right, HOA maps are obsolete. They never filed the correction. That was my first real breath in a week. I could feel the plan starting to form. Not revenge, not yet, just a clean alignment of facts. But Linda wasn't done. Tuesday morning, she showed up herself. Clipboard, phone camera, and a sheriff's deputy trailing like a prop. Claire answered the door in her robe. Linda pointed to the driveway. Illegal modification to common surface. You'll need to remove this extension. It's not an extension, I said, stepping between them. It's original concrete, recorded 1999. Her smile didn't falter. We'll see what the board decides. She clicked another photo, close enough that I smelled her perfume. Sharp citrus, expensive, artificial. The deputy looked uncomfortable. Sir, I'm just here to keep the peace. You might want to note, I said quietly, that she's trespassing on private property. He sighed, writing something in his pad. Noted. When they left, Claire sat on the steps and cried. She loves this, she whispered. She loves making us feel small. That night, I started a spreadsheet. Dates, incidents, witnesses, documents. I called it the record. Every good engineer knows, if you measure long enough, patterns emerge. Before bed, Claire touched my arm. You're not going to start a war, are you? Not a war, I said. An audit. Within a week, the audit took on a life of its own. Lisa dropped off a thumb drive labeled HC Maps, 1999-2023. Inside were 14 revisions, all unsigned by a licensed surveyor. That's strike 1, she said, sipping her thermos coffee. Uncertified plats can't legally amend boundaries, I added her. Printouts to the binder, tabbed them in red. The HOA held its monthly meeting 2 days later at the clubhouse. Same gray carpet, same folding chairs, same smug posture from Linda at the podium. Claire didn't want me to go. They'll twist your words, she warned. I went anyway, wearing my work boots and a calm face. When they called for open comments, I stepped up. You fined my wife for parking on our driveway, I said, setting the map on the podium. Your enforcement map hasn't been updated since 2001. The county corrected it in 1999. You've been citing homeowners on obsolete data for 20 years. Linda didn't flinch. Sir, this isn't a legal proceeding. It's about governance, I replied, and you've been governing off fantasy. Gasps rippled through the room. Mark leaned toward her, whispering. I caught one phrase. Get counsel involved. That was when I realized they weren't afraid of being wrong. They were afraid of being caught. After the meeting, a man I'd never met approached me in the parking lot. Name's Ed, he said. Retired accountant, gray hair, ink stains on his shirt cuff. They've been overbilling the landscaping fund by 15% for years. I can prove it. He handed me a flash drive and disappeared into the night like a ghost who'd been waiting for permission to speak. Early the next morning, Claire found another note taped to our mailbox. Stop causing trouble. No signature, just that. She looked at me, voice tight. They're targeting us. I photographed the note, logged it, Exhibit B. At work, I couldn't focus on blueprints. Every vibration of my phone felt like another petty threat. I called Lisa again. Can you check who signed their permits for the entrance lighting upgrade last spring? She laughed softly. If they even filed one. By Friday, she emailed back, no permit found in county record. Could be a code violation. No. Ledge nugget number 2. Any electrical or structural modification on HOA common property typically requires municipal permit review and inspection. Unfiled work can void the HOA's insurance. They fined my wife $350 for a parking violation that never happened, stapled the notice to our door like a scarlet letter, and gave us 7 days to rectify. 7 days later, they trespassed on our driveway with a camera, snapping pictures like we were criminals. Welcome to HOA Society. I'm Daniel Morrow, civil engineer out of Marion County, Ohio. I built half the drainage layouts in this suburb before I ever lived here. My wife, Claire, teaches second grade at Ridge Elementary. We moved to Heather Creek Estates in 2018 because it promised community integrity. Turns out that meant control, down to mailbox paint and the exact shade of mulch. If you're watching from another HOA nightmare, tell me where you're tuning in from. I'd love to know how far this madness spreads. The day the citation arrived, Claire was icing a cake for our daughter's 10th birthday. I remember her hands shaking, pink frosting smudged on the envelope. "They say we parked on common ground," she murmured, eyes glassy. I looked outside. Her Honda sat squarely in our own driveway. That's how it started. The HOA president, Linda Parsons, had ruled this place for 12 years. Former real estate agent, now self-anointed queen of compliance. Her email signature actually read, "Preserving values, enforcing standards." She had 2 lieutenants, Mark, the treasurer who acted like an auditor for God, and Cynthia, the so-called landscape coordinator, who carried a measuring tape more than her phone. I'd heard stories, fines for kids' chalk drawings, threats over Halloween decorations, even a warning to a widower for unsightly grief clutter. But Claire and I kept quiet, paid our dues, kept our hedges at regulation height, 42 inches per covenant 6.3, until the photo stunt. When I walked down to the HOA office the next morning, Linda was waiting behind a polished desk with a mug that said, "Boss Lady." I set the notice on her blotter. "This is trespass," I said. "You don't step on my property to stage evidence." Her lips curved barely. "You signed the CCRs, Mr. Morrow. Enforcement includes documentation." "Not fabrication," I replied. "You can appeal. Next quarter's meeting." She slid a form across the desk, smirking. "But you'll still owe late fees." That smirk did something I didn't expect. It reminded me of the hospital administrator who downplayed my father's collapse 3 years earlier, when they delayed treatment for an insurance code. That same paper authority, that same hollow power. I'd promised myself after Dad's funeral that I'd never let bureaucrats hide behind forms again. When I got home, Claire was at the window, clutching her mug like armor. "They posted the pictures online," she whispered. "Our neighbors saw." There it was, the public humiliation. HOA gossip spread faster than wildfire. Within hours, someone left a note. "Rules are rules. Welcome to the neighborhood." That night, I opened the CCR binder for the first time since closing day. 183 pages. By Clause 14.2, any enforcement must be based on objective measurement and property boundaries as recorded. That last phrase, "as recorded," stuck in my head like a splinter. I found the county parcel map online. Our driveway extended exactly 3.5 feet past the line they claimed as common easement, a 1999 boundary correction recorded after the HOA was formed, meaning they'd been enforcing on outdated maps for 20 years. The next morning, I printed the map and date-stamped it, June 6, 2023. I slid it into a binder labeled Evidence A Knowledge Nugget Number 1. In most U.S. states, an HOA cannot enforce rules beyond the legally recorded property lines. County plats trump HOA drawings every time. I didn't tell Claire yet. I needed more. That weekend, I called an old colleague, Lisa Chen, now a licensed surveyor. She agreed to meet after hours, no charge. "Let me guess, Heather Creek HOA?" she said, pulling her ponytail through a ball cap. I knew exactly what to do next, quietly. Meanwhile, the harassment escalated. On Saturday, a courtesy inspection notice was wedged into our doorframe. Exterior debris observed. Toy left on lawn. They'd photographed my daughter's soccer ball. Claire's hands trembled as she read it. "They're watching us." That night I sat on the porch with a notebook, logging each event. I could hear the hum of streetlights, the distant hiss of sprinklers. A mild breeze carried the smell of cut grass and something sour, fear mixed with stubbornness. 2 more neighbors stopped by that week. June, a widow from Lot 42, whispered, "They fined me for feeding the ducks. I just wanted company." And Carlos from Lot 15 showed me a $500 citation for unapproved color tone. His garage door was beige, identical to Linda's. Patterns. Everything was pattern. By the time I compiled it all, the binder weighed 8 pounds. I labeled the spine Heather Creek Enforcement File, confidential. At home, Claire started locking the doors before sunset. Our daughter, Ellie, asked why people stared when she rode her bike. "Just neighbors confused about boundaries," I said, forcing a smile. The next HOA newsletter arrived mid-month. On page 2, reminder, non-compliance undermines our community standards. Under it, a photo cropped tight on our driveway, license plate visible. No names, but everyone knew. I printed that page, slid it under Exhibit C. My friend Nate, a city code inspector, stopped by one evening. "Heard you've stirred the nest," he said, setting his clipboard down. "Listen, if they installed lighting without permits, that's my jurisdiction. You want me to check?" "Not yet," I told him. "Let them hang the rope first." The next meeting was in 3 weeks, plenty of time. I spent the days leading up to it studying Ohio Revised Code 5312, the Planned Community Act, Section 5312.11c. An ass. Association shall maintain complete books and records of account, and shall make them reasonably available to any owner for inspection. Reasonably available. That meant me. When I requested access, Linda's email came back within minutes. Records are for board use only. Perfect. That was a direct violation. I saved it. Exhibit D. Claire watched me arrange the tabs late one night. "You look like you're building a case." "I am," I said, "and they're writing it for me." Before the next meeting, I called Ed again. "You still have those ledgers?" "Got backups," he said. "They use duplicate vendors to funnel maintenance payments. I traced $14,860 misapplied over 3 fiscal years. Can you certify that?" "I'm retired, but I still know how to balance a sheet." We agreed to meet at the coffee shop near the courthouse. He wore a tweed jacket, old calculator still in his pocket. "Paper trail's clean," he said, sliding me a folder. They never expected anyone to add up the totals. That night I scanned every page, time-stamped, backed up to a cloud drive. It wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about proof. About making sure no one else's kid watched their parent crumble over a fake violation. Halfway through labeling exhibits, I realized my hand was shaking. Not from fear, but adrenaline. The kind that comes before a fight you know you can win. Still, Claire looked uneasy. "You think they'll stop?" she asked. "No," I said, "but soon they'll wish they had." And just like that, the first real strategy formed. Buy silence until it's too late. The night before the next meeting, I couldn't sleep. The binder sat on the dining table like a loaded weapon. Tabs, photos, spreadsheets, dates. Claire made tea, stood by the window. "You're shaking," she said quietly. I was. Not from fear, but from the weight of what was coming. The county was auctioning it next quarter. Leverage. If I acquired that parcel through an LLC, I'd control the HOA's stormwater easement. They couldn't legally maintain drainage or irrigation without my permission. I called James. "Can an individual purchase that lien through an LLC?" He smiled. "Perfectly legal. Just don't announce it." So I formed Marion Basin LLC, registered under my old business address, filed anonymously through a service. The purchase took 48 hours. The county confirmed by mail. Tax lien assignment recorded July 2, 2023. Reversal number 1 was officially in motion, though no one but me knew it yet. The pond sat behind the clubhouse, a quiet mirror of algae and dragonflies. I'd jogged past it 100 times without noticing the small utility box labeled Storm Valve Access, Lot 47A. That box now belonged to me. Claire didn't even know. Not yet. I wanted her to have plausible deniability. By the next HOA meeting, they'd doubled our fines. Cumulative penalties for non-compliance, Linda announced in another letter. $1,050 total. It was almost funny. That night, I drafted a short email. "Dear Board, per Section 8.4 of Heather Creek Covenants, continued use of Lot 47A requires owner authorization. You may request access in writing. Sincerely, Authorized Representative, Marion Basin, LLC. I hit send at 9:13 p.m. and slept for the first time in weeks." The next morning, the phone rang before breakfast. Claire answered, eyes wide. "It's Linda. She sounds different." I took the phone. "Yes?" "What is Marion Basin, LLC?" she asked, voice brittle. "Just a local property owner," I said. "Why?" Pause. Then, "We'll be in touch." Click. I smiled. The leverage was working. Now the real game would begin. For 2 full days, the neighborhood felt unnaturally quiet. No inspection notices, no drive-bys, no passive-aggressive newsletters. Even the board's Facebook group went silent. That's when you know you've struck the artery. They retreat to regroup. Wednesday evening, around dusk, I heard gravel crunch outside. Linda's SUV. She stepped out in heels too sharp for asphalt, holding a clipboard like a shield. Behind her was Mark, clutching a manila folder. Claire froze at the kitchen window. Linda called out, "Daniel, we need to discuss Lot 47A." I walked to the driveway slowly, wiping my hands on a rag. Discuss or demand? She didn't smile. The retention pond is essential common property. You can't withhold access. I'm not withholding, I said. I'm just requiring written authorization, standard protocol. Mark cut in, voice rising. You're extorting the board. No, I said evenly. I'm enforcing the same compliance you love so much. Claire stepped outside, worry etched on her face. Is this really necessary? Linda shot her a condescending glance. Mrs. Morrow, your husband's actions jeopardize the entire community's infrastructure. That's funny, I said. You were fine jeopardizing it with unpermitted wiring. Her jaw tightened. You'll regret this. Maybe, I said, but I'll regret it on dry land. You'll regret it underwater when the drainage backs up. She left in silence, heels clacking, but I caught the tremor in her voice when she ordered Mark back into the SUV. Fear smells like old paper, dry, brittle, ready to burn. That night, I emailed James, my attorney, to file a formal notice of intent to inspect HOA maintenance records under Ohio statute. He attached a boilerplate letter. Concise, lawful, unshakable. Give them 72 hours, he said. If they stall, we escalate to the Department of Commerce. 3 days later, no response. But the retaliation returned, fast. A safety patrol SUV idled near our house every evening. New notices appeared. Unauthorized commercial activity, LLC registration discovered. Then came the anonymous complaint to the sheriff's office about potential water contamination at Lot 47A. The deputy who showed up recognized me. When I walked into the clubhouse the next evening, half the neighborhood was there. Linda opened with her usual monotone about community compliance. Her pearls glinted under the fluorescence. I waited until open forum, then stood and placed the binder on the podium with a thud loud enough to silence the room. This, I said, is every violation notice issued in the last 6 months, 34 of them. 21 were invalid. Your own maps, financial records, and permit filings prove it. I opened the binder to the first tab, Lisa's certified survey. She cut in, smiling. Mr. Morrow, you're misinterpreting property records. Am I? I flipped to the next tab, because the county inspector doesn't think so. Mark shifted in his chair, whispering to her again. Let's adjourn, he muttered, but the residents leaned forward, curious. I had their attention, finally. Also, I said, your lighting upgrade last spring. No permits filed, no inspection completed. That voids your insurance coverage for common areas. Murmurs spread like fire. Linda's face stiffened. You can't speak for our insurer. Actually, I can quote their underwriter, I said, holding up an email printout. They confirmed in writing that unpermitted work nullifies liability coverage under policy 1427K. Silence. I knew I'd drawn blood. But I wasn't finished. Your treasurer, Mark, signed duplicate invoices for landscaping maintenance under 2 vendor IDs, both registered to the same P.O. box. You've overbilled homeowners by roughly $14,860 since 2020. Someone in the back whispered, Is that true? Another voice, I paid that assessment. Linda slammed her gavel. Meeting adjourned. This is slander. I smiled calmly. No, it's math. Knowledge nugget number 3. In most states, false statements made during a public HOA meeting are protected if they're based on verifiable records and presented for Gov. Renance transparency, what's called a qualified privilege. Outside afterward, Ed met me by the flagpole. You stirred it good, he said. They'll retaliate, I replied. They always do, he said, patting my shoulder. Just keep your records tight. And retaliate they did. Within 48 hours, the HOA cited us for unapproved lawn modifications. The modification? 2 planters Claire placed by the mailbox. Then came an anonymous Facebook post accusing me of threatening board members. A local gossip blog shared it. My company's HR even got an email complaint, unsigned, but clearly Linda's phrasing. Claire broke down again. How can people be this cruel? Because they think the rules protect them, I said. But rules only protect the truthful. That weekend, I installed a motion-activated camera by the driveway, fully disclosed under Ohio's single-party consent rule, visible from the street, compliant. On Monday morning, 3:17 a.m., it captured Cynthia walking up, flashlight in hand, measuring tape dangling. She snapped photos of the same driveway they'd already cited. I copied the footage to 3 drives, labeled it Exhibit E, Trespass 3:17 a.m. When I emailed the footage to the HOA inbox, no reply. But by noon, Linda sent a new notice. Unauthorized surveillance devices constitute community nuisance. That made me laugh. They think they can outlaw evidence, I told Claire. By Tuesday, I'd had enough. I met with my attorney, James Rucker, a tall man with gray hair and a calm voice, known for his fairness in HOA litigation. He flipped through my binder silently, page by page. You built quite a record, he said finally. They violated at least 3 statutory obligations. You don't need to sue yet. You need leverage. Meaning? I asked. Buy something they don't realize they depend on, he said. Something small, overlooked, but central. I thought about that for days. And then, during a late-night scroll through county property filings, I saw it. The HOA's retention pond parcel, .87 acres, had a tax lien from 2019, unpaid. $2,940. Really? He said, sighing. They sent this in? Anonymous, I replied. But I'm guessing the perfume was citrus. He laughed. You didn't hear that from me. Claire was fraying. One night she said, I miss who we were before this. I do too, I admitted. But this isn't just about us anymore. Because by now, other neighbors were whispering. The widow, June, left a tin of cookies on our porch with a note. Keep going. We're behind you. Carlos texted, Can you check my records too? I realized something. I wasn't just defending my home. I was auditing an empire of intimidation. Midweek, I met with Nate, the city inspector friend, in his truck parked behind the library. He wore his municipal badge clipped to the visor. Pulled the permit file on that lighting, he said. Still nothing. But here's the kicker. They used HOA reserve funds. That's insurance fraud if the insurer wasn't notified. Can you document that? He nodded. Already did. Want copies? Knowledge nugget number 4. Misuse of HOA reserve funds for unpermitted work not only violates state statutes, but can also trigger insurer clawbacks and criminal liability for board officers. I grinned. Nate, you're about to make history in Heather Creek. By now, I'd built a separate binder just for leverage items, financials, permits, liens. I labeled it Set Piece Prep. Each document had a yellow sticky note with timing instructions. It wasn't just about proof anymore. It was choreography. The plan was simple. I'd let them trap themselves. The next general meeting was scheduled for August 2nd. That's when they'd attempt to revoke my membership for malicious interference. They didn't know I already owned their drainage lifeline. A week before the meeting, Ed called. They're holding an emergency session tonight. Executive format, not on the public calendar. How'd you know? Still got friends on the email list, he said. Linda's panicking. So I parked outside the clubhouse that night, 2 rows back, camera rolling from the dashboard. Through the window blinds, I could see silhouettes, Linda pacing, Mark gesturing wildly. I didn't record audio. Ohio's all-party consent law required their knowledge, but the timestamps and visuals were enough. At 9:42 p.m., Mark stormed out and threw a folder into the back seat of his car. When he drove off, I stepped out, crouched by the door. There on the ground was a single page that must have slipped loose. I picked it up. It was a draft notice for Emergency Special Assessment, Drainage System Upgrade. Amount, $48,000. Due date, upon confirmation of easement access. That line made me laugh out loud. They were trying to fund a repair on land they no longer owned. I tucked the page into the binder, Exhibit F. By the time I got home, Claire was waiting on the porch, blanket around her shoulders. You've got that look again, she said. What look? The one right before you build something no one can tear down. She was right. I spent the next few nights drafting my presentation for the August meeting. James would attend as my consultant. Nate would bring his inspection report. Lisa would certify the survey one more time. Ed would quietly pass around the accounting discrepancies to the residents before the meeting started. The night before, I stood over the dining table, 3 binders lined up like a firing squad. Claire brushed my arm. What if they come after your job next? Then I'll have time to finish what I started, I said. On August 2nd, the parking lot overflowed. Over 100 residents packed the room. Linda looked uneasy for the first time in her reign. The gavel shook slightly when she called order. Tonight's agenda, she said, voice quivering, includes disciplinary action regarding Mr. Daniel Morrow. I stood. Helmet binder in hand. Before you proceed, Madam President, I said, I think you'll want to hear what the county property office had to say about your retention pond. She froze. A murmur spread through the room. And that was the moment, the quiet before the storm, when I knew the set piece had arrived. Every chair creaked as people leaned forward. Linda's eyes darted between the board members, searching for someone brave enough to speak first. No one did. The air tasted metallic, like rain before thunder. I slid a certified deed copy onto the podium. Per county record 2023-142B, Lot 47A, also known as your drainage retention parcel, is now owned by Marion Basin, LLC. I paused, letting the words settle like dust. And I represent that LLC. A hush fell over the room. Mark muttered, "That's impossible." I held up the stamped receipt from the county treasurer. "It's not impossible. It's paid in full." Linda's voice broke through, sharp and brittle. "This is outrageous. You can't weaponize a lien to blackmail this board." "Blackmail," I repeated. "I'm offering accountability. You used this property without paying taxes for 4 years. You ignored maintenance obligations, issued false citations, and now you want to spend $48,000 repairing a system you don't even own." From the back row, someone clapped once, slow, deliberate. Then a second person joined. The sound swelled until the whole room echoed. Linda banged her gavel. "This is disorderly conduct." James, my attorney, rose calmly beside me. "Madam President, I'm counsel to Mr. Morrow. We have verified the ownership and notified your insurer. Continued access without written consent would constitute trespass under ORC 29-121. A man in a khaki uniform stepped forward. Officer Lane, the community police liaison. His presence was required for every HOA meeting after a previous noise dispute turned violent. "He's right," Lane said evenly. "If the parcel changed hands, the HOA needs permission. That's the law." And there it was, the neutral authority confirming it on record. The room erupted again. I took a breath, steadying my pulse. "You don't need to worry," I said. "Access will continue, once transparency is restored." "What do you want?" Linda asked through gritted teeth. "Public audit of all fines, recorded minutes of every closed meeting, and a full accounting of reserve funds, within 30 days. Mark slammed his folder shut. "You think you can hold this community hostage?" "No," I said quietly. "I think I can free it." Claire watched from the side of the room, eyes glistening but proud. She knew this wasn't just revenge. It was redemption for every neighbor too scared to speak. That night, after the meeting adjourned in chaos, I found a note tucked under my windshield wiper. "You made your point. Stop before you regret it." The letters were jagged, hurried. I photographed it, logged it as Exhibit G. The retaliation was immediate and relentless. The next morning, the HOA's website posted an emergency bylaw amendment, restriction on business entities owning common parcels. I laughed. Retroactive laws? Bold strategy. 2 hours later, the city inspector's office called Nate. Someone, anonymous again, had filed a complaint claiming my drainage parcel was contaminated. He texted me, "They're trying to drag you into environmental regs." I called him back. "Can you test the water?" "Already done. Clean. They're bluff." But Claire was unraveling. One night she whispered, "Maybe just sell it back." I took her hand. "If I give it back now, they'll bury everyone else next. I just don't want them to hurt you. They already tried. That's how you know you're close to winning." 3 days later, I came home to find a compliance enforcement notice taped to our front door. signed by Linda herself. The offense? Improper signage on private parcel, Lot 47A. The sign was a 1-foot survey marker Lisa had installed for measurement. That was my breaking point. I drafted a 12-page letter to the HOA's insurer attaching Exhibits A through G, citing policy violations, unpermitted work, and fiduciary breaches. James reviewed it overnight. "Send it certified," he said. "They'll have to investigate." I mailed it the next morning, certified, return receipt requested. Within 72 hours, the insurer's compliance department acknowledged receipt. Preliminary review indicates possible breach of fiduciary duty and misrepresentation of coverage scope. It was the beginning of the domino effect. Still, I didn't relax. Every day another small jab appeared. Trash bins accidentally overturned, mailbox left open in the rain, a fake parking ticket on Claire's car. I documented each one. One night around midnight, the motion camera pinged. I checked the feed. Someone was walking along our fence line, hooded, moving slow. I grabbed a flashlight and stepped outside. "You're on camera," I called out. The figure froze, then bolted into the dark. I stood there in the cold night air, heart hammering, the sound of crickets filling the silence after the gate clicked shut. I realized then, I wasn't scared anymore. I was angry, but clean angry, focused. The next morning I gathered every file, every exhibit, and drove to the county clerk's office. The receptionist raised an eyebrow as I set the stack on her counter. "Public filing?" "Transparency," I said. The clerk stamped the top page. Received August 10th, 2023. That sound, the rubber slap of the ink pad, was the most satisfying I'd ever heard. By the end of that week, an investigator from the insurer called. "Mr. Morrow, we're conducting a compliance audit on Heather Creek HOA. Would you be available for an interview?" "Absolutely," I said. "I'll bring the coffee." Before hanging up, she added, "You should know, the board's own policy might be suspended during review. That means they can use HOA funds for legal defense." I smiled. The machine was eating itself, but I knew better than to celebrate early. Empires collapse slow, then all at once. That night, as I shut off the porch light, I could hear the frogs croaking from the retention pond, the one they no longer controlled. It sounded like applause. The investigation moved faster than anyone expected. By mid-August, the insurer had dispatched an external auditor, a quiet woman named Rebecca with sharp eyes and a calm voice. She met me at a diner on Main Street, notebook already open. "Everything you filed checks out," she said, flipping through color-coded tabs. "The duplicate vendors, the unpermitted work, the withheld records, it's all verifiable. You've essentially done our job for us." I smiled. Engineers are good at following lines until they close a loop. She nodded. "Expect suspension letters within 10 business days." 10 days. That was the countdown. I wrote it on a post-it above my desk like a finish line. Meanwhile, the board went on full propaganda mode. Flyers appeared on every mailbox. "Protect our community from outside interests." The irony was delicious. They called me outside in my own neighborhood. Then came the smear post on the HOA portal. "Certain residents are exploiting loopholes to undermine unity." Claire read it and sighed. "Unity? They mean obedience." "Exactly," I said. "And obedience dies the moment sunlight hits it." The retaliation kept stacking. Petty, precise. A wellness check request for suspected domestic dispute, called in anonymously, brought 2 deputies to our door one Sunday morning. Officer Lane was among them. "I'm sorry, Daniel," he said quietly. "We're required to respond." "I know," I replied. "Can you note this was the 3rd false report in 30 days? Already done." That was the breaking point for several neighbors. June started walking, with Claire in the mornings again. Carlos printed out his own violations and taped them to his window under a handwritten sign. "Show me where it's illegal." For the first time, the community wasn't whispering. They were watching. The 10th day came, right on schedule. At 9:42 a.m., Linda's SUV screeched to a stop outside the clubhouse. She rushed inside, Mark trailing, clutching a stack of envelopes. I parked nearby, pretending to be on my phone. Through the glass doors, I saw her tear one open, her face drained of color. Rebecca had kept her word. Insurance suspension notice. Immediate coverage. Hold pending compliance review. Without insurance, the HOA couldn't pay vendors, conduct enforcement, or host meetings. They were paralyzed. That night, Linda emailed all residents. Temporary administrative pause due to insurer audit. Translation: they'd lost their power. Claire brought 2 glasses of wine onto the porch. "Is it over?" she asked. "Not yet," I said, watching the sunset bleed orange over the roofs. Empires don't die from one wound. They bleed out slowly. The next morning, I got an unexpected call from Nate, the city inspector. "You might want to see this," he said. "Council's agenda lists an emergency maintenance petition from Heather Creek HOA. They're trying to fix the drainage without permission? Looks like it. Then let's make it public." We showed up early to the council session. The chamber smelled of dust and disinfectant. At the far end of the table sat Linda, eyes hollow, papers trembling in her hands. The chairman adjusted his glasses. "Madam President, before we proceed, do you have easement authorization from the parcel owner?" Linda hesitated. "We're in process of obtaining it." "That's a no," the chairman said. "Then this petition is invalid." The gavel dropped. One strike. Done. Outside the building, cameras clicked. A local reporter approached me, mic raised. "Mr. Morrow, are you the homeowner who bought the retention parcel?" "Yes," I said simply. "And I'll keep it safe until this community has leadership that remembers what honesty looks like." That clip ran on the evening news. Within hours, our story hit the HOA Reform subreddit, then local Facebook groups. Messages poured in, people from Georgia, Texas, Arizona, all saying the same thing. "You're living our nightmare." The next morning, I found my mailbox overflowing. Not with fines this time, but with thank you notes from neighbors. But the board wasn't finished. They called an emergency meeting at Linda's house off record to vote on suing me for tortious interference. Ed tipped me off. I didn't interrupt. I didn't need to. Their own insurance suspension barred them from funding litigation. Every vote they cast that night would be void. Still, I wanted the documentation. So the next day I filed a Freedom of Information Act request with the County Ethics Office. Simple, factual. It would later reveal that Mark had personally authorized payments to a vendor run by his cousin. That was the final thread. Once it pulled, the whole net collapsed. By mid-September, Linda resigned for health reasons. Mark followed a week later, citing family obligations. Cynthia vanished from the directory entirely. Claire came out onto the porch one cool morning and said, "You did it." I looked at the quiet street, the kids riding bikes without side-eyeing the patrol cars, June watering her plants again. "No," I said. "We did it." Still, I knew it wasn't enough to win. It had to mean something larger. That evening, as I reviewed my notes, James called. "You've got them cornered. Use it. Leverage it for change." "What kind of change?" "Structural, permanent, reform." Reversal number 2 was beginning to take shape in my head. A deal that would fix the system instead of just punishing the players. But first, there would have to be one final, public reckoning. The public reckoning came sooner than I thought. The County Ethics Board scheduled an open hearing for early October to address resident complaints and financial irregularities within Heather Creek Estates HOA. For the first time in a decade, it wasn't Linda calling the meeting. It was the state itself. The room was packed. Reporters lined the back wall. Even the air felt heavier, charged. I took my seat near the front with James beside me, my binders stacked like bricks. Claire squeezed my hand once and whispered, "Stay calm. You've already won." At the long table sat the remaining board members, visibly worn. The new acting president, an accountant named Douglas Shaw, looked like he hadn't slept in days. Linda was there too, technically advising the board, but no longer in power. Her pearls were gone, replaced by a plain sweater, her authority stripped as clean as the room's white walls. The hearing officer, a woman in a navy blazer, adjusted her glasses. "We'll begin with the complainant, Mr. Daniel Morrow." I stood, cleared my throat, and began, not with anger, but precision. "For the record, I'm a licensed civil engineer, homeowner, and taxpayer of this county. Over the last 6 months, the Heather Creek HOA has issued 34 citations, conducted 11 unauthorized inspections, and enforced at least 21 invalid fines. These acts were supported by outdated maps, misused funds, and falsified communications. Then I slid a folder across the table. Here you'll find documented proof of tax delinquency on Lot 47A, the parcel now owned by Marion Basin, LLC. This property underpins the community's drainage system and was acquired legally through public auction. The officer nodded. And you have documentation? Stamped, notarized, and indexed, I said, tapping the binder. Her pen scratch across the page. Proceed. Next came Nate's inspection report, photos, measurements, unfiled permits. Then Ed's financials, itemizing duplicate invoices and conflicting vendor IDs. Rebecca from the insurance firm submitted her compliance audit via statement. The board's actions resulted in immediate policy suspension pending restitution and transparency. Linda tried to interrupt, voice trembling. This is all a misunderstanding. We've served this neighborhood for years. The officer raised a hand. Mrs. Parsons, you'll have time to respond. When it was her turn, Linda straightened her papers and said, Mr. Morrow bought that drainage parcel as a stunt. He's exploiting technicalities to embarrass the board. I looked directly at her. You call it a stunt. I call it stewardship. Someone had to fix what you broke. The officer nodded slowly, her gaze sharp. You admit the HOA failed to record boundary updates and operated under outdated plats? Linda hesitated. That may have been an oversight. 20 years of oversight? The officer replied, eyebrow raised. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. The flash of a camera clicked somewhere behind me. Then came the moment I'd been waiting for. The officer leaned forward. Mr. Morrow, what outcome do you seek? I looked around the room, at the tired faces, the neighbors who'd been fined for trivialities, the kids peeking through the doorway to see what justice looked like. Then I spoke carefully, each word deliberate. I don't want revenge. I want reform. The room went silent. Even Linda stopped fidgeting. I want the HOA restructured with term limits for board members, open access to financial records, independent audits every year, and a code of conduct prohibiting harassment or retaliation. I also want a rollback of all unlawful fines and a community fund established for residents who've been overcharged. The officer wrote quickly. That's a tall order. Justice usually is, I said. The new HOA website launched in November with an open ledger feature showing every expense and a section called Community Questions. My name wasn't on it anywhere, and that's exactly how I wanted it. One evening, Douglas called to give an update. The first audit came back clean. We refunded about $9,600 in invalid fines. Residents voted to rename the retention pond, wanted your approval. I laughed. I don't own it anymore, remember? It's yours now. Still, he said, they want to call it Restoration Basin. The name stuck. A month later, the local news aired a follow-up. Heather Creek HOA implements sweeping reforms after residents stand. They showed clips of kids playing near the water, the new board smiling awkwardly for the camera. The final line of the segment read, Transparency begins where fear ends. That night, I sat on the porch, the same spot where all of this had begun. The notices, the threats, the anxiety. The street was quiet except for the hum of crickets and the soft rustle of trees. Claire brought out 2 mugs of coffee, steam rising in the cool air. She looked at me. You never told me why this mattered so much. Not just the fight, but the way you fought. I stared at the horizon, the amber glow reflecting off the houses. Because I saw what happens when systems forget people. I watched it take my father. I wasn't going to let it take our home. She nodded, eyes glistening. You didn't just save our home, Daniel. You saved this place. The motion light flicked on as a car passed, catching the silver plaque newly installed by the HOA gate. Heather Creek Community Charter, founded 2002, reformed 2023. A gust of wind fluttered the pages of the signed reform agreement resting on the table beside me. I pressed them flat with my hand, the paper cool and heavy against my palm. If you believe I fought the right way, and this is how it should, end, I'd say to anyone watching, leave a few words below for someone you'd stand up for. Subscribe so you don't miss the next fight, and share this story. That's how change grows. The next morning, I delivered one final letter to the county records office, a simple statement transferring Lot 47A, the retention pond, back to the HOA under its new charter. The clerk stamped it, smiled. Feels good, doesn't it? Better than winning, I said. Feels like fixing. As I walked out, the sky was clear and endless. The air smelled like cut grass and rain that hadn't fallen yet. A week later, a small envelope arrived. No return address, just a note inside. You did what we all wish we could have done. Keep watching out for the next one. I tucked it into the back of my notebook, under the last page labeled Closure. And as the porch light flickered on that night, I whispered to myself, on to the next case. The frogs at the basin croaked in steady rhythm, like a closing chorus. For a long minute, all that could be heard was the soft tick of the wall clock. Then the officer turned to the board. Would the association consider a voluntary compliance agreement to those terms? Douglas, the acting president, swallowed hard. Yes, he said. We need to move forward. The community deserves better. That was it. The dam finally broke. Linda rose suddenly, her voice cracking. You can't. The officer cut her off. Mrs. Parsons, you're excused from further participation pending review of fiduciary conduct. Her chair scraped back hard, then silence. A hush spread across the room as Officer Lane stepped forward from the back, uniform crisp, notepad ready. For the record, he said, county law enforcement will assist with document preservation and ensure no further interference. The flash of the camera popped again, and I realized this moment would be remembered. The gavel, the files, the quiet nods of approval. When it was over, people approached me quietly, one after another. June hugged Claire. Carlos shook my hand. Even Douglas managed a weary smile. You just changed everything, he said. Outside, as the sun dipped low, the reporter from the local news caught up again. Mr. Morrow, she said, some are calling this the HOA revolution. Any comment? Just accountability, I said, and a little bit of fresh air. That clip ran on the 6 o'clock broadcast. The thumbnail froze on me standing in front of the courthouse, binder under one arm, sunset behind me. Debate prompt for the audience. What counts as overreach? How far should an HOA's power go before it stops protecting and starts punishing? Leave your thoughts below. I didn't know it yet, but that night would spark a county-wide petition drive for HOA transparency laws. Still, my story wasn't done. Not until the reform was in writing, signed, sealed, and made real. The reform deal was drafted within 2 weeks. Rebecca from the insurer acted as mediator, her tone balanced, precise. Douglas, now officially president, invited me and James to the boardroom, a space that once smelled like intimidation, but now just smelled faintly of coffee and new carpet. Here's what we're proposing, Douglas said, sliding the papers across the table. I scanned the pages. Term limits. 2 consecutive terms max. Quarterly open meetings. Independent annual audit by a licensed CPA. Public posting of all expenditures over $500, and a permanent community access charter for residents. It was everything I'd demanded, and more. They even added an ethics and conduct committee, chaired by a resident volunteer, to handle complaints without bias. James read each clause, then looked up. This is comprehensive, he said. You sign this, Daniel, and the leverage dissolves cleanly. I nodded. That's the idea. Accountability, not vengeance. Linda was nowhere in sight. She'd lawyered up, apparently negotiating her own settlement with the insurer. Mark faced a civil citation for misappropriation of funds. Cynthia's whereabouts remained unknown. I signed the papers, then placed the binder of evidence in front of Douglas. Keep this. Every tab, every page. History has a short memory. Make sure yours doesn't. He nodded solemnly. Thank you. When we stepped outside, the air felt different. Lighter, cleaner. The fountain in front of the clubhouse actually ran for the first time in months, glinting in the afternoon sun. Claire waited by the car, hands in her jacket pockets. So? She asked. It's done, I said. She smiled, small but real. Finally. Over the next few weeks, the change was visible everywhere. Neighbors who hadn't spoken in years started talking again. June planted new roses by her porch. Carlos organized a community barbecue. Even the kids started chalking the sidewalks a gain, no fines, no fear, just color.